Through the glass, a father.
The corridors of the East Wing were hushed. Servants had long since withdrawn. The feast was over. The whispering had moved to darker places. Selene moved like smoke, her footsteps silent on the red marble floor. The blood oath still ached faintly beneath her ribs, a dull pulse that felt like guilt or prophecy. She should have gone directly to the gardens. But something pulled her. She turned the last corner and stopped. The door to the Crimson Chamber stood ajar. Inside, lit by the dying hearth, her father sat alone. Not at the head of the table. Not flanked by counselors or shrouded in his usual veil of command. He was seated off-center, back-bowed, a small glass chess piece turning slowly in his hand. She recognized it immediately. The Queen. Her piece. From the carved set they used to play in the West Solar. The one he let her win with once, just once, when she was 7. He was whispering to it. She couldn't hear the words. Didn't dare step closer. His face, half lit by firelight, was different than she remembered. Tired. Older. Not cruel. Just quietly unraveling. She should have walked away. She should have hardened. But for a breath, just a breath, Selene remembered him as he used to be. The father who had held her steady the first time she climbed a horse. Who had taught her how to speak without blinking. Who had looked at her not as a weapon, not as a risk, but as something he believed in. He still held the Queen. Still turned it. Over and over. Like a man turning over a wound. She stepped back, silent as snowfall, and vanished down the hall. She didn't cry. But the weight in her chest had shifted. He was still a piece of the machine. But maybe, just maybe, he'd left her a crack to escape through. Or burn.
Chapter 6. Blades in the Dark.
The citadel breathed like a living thing, all stone and bone and cold malice. Selene crouched in the damp hollow of a ruined chamber beneath the east wing, her cloak sodden with dust and sweat, the iron taste of fear sharp in her mouth. Above them, through floors and walls, she could hear it, the hum of music, the murmur of courtiers, the distant clash of goblets. Tonight was the night of oaths. Once, it had been sacred, a solemn renewal of the pacts that bound noble houses to the Dominion's heart. Now it was just another performance, gilded and hollow. Above, the nobles laughed and pledged false loyalty on blades dipped in bloodwine. Below, Selene prepared to betray everything she had ever been taught to protect. Cassian knelt across from her, checking their worn satchel, steel, rope, wax-sealed flints, a single oilskin of accelerant. And the desperate scrap of a plan. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, voice low. Selene met his gaze without flinching. "There's no path left but forward." He studied her for a breath longer. Then nodded, trusting her even now. Especially now. The blood oath between them pulsed faintly beneath her skin, not pain, but heat. A reminder. Our fates are bound. Together, or not at all. Selene rose, brushing dust from her palms. Her heart beat slow and savage in her chest. "We move," she said. They slipped into the forgotten corridors like wraiths, every step a prayer, every breath a rebellion. The vaults of House Veylor lay buried beneath the east wing, guarded by magic, steel, and blood. Selene had memorized the paths as a child, tracing them with chalk and whispered oaths. She had been raised to inherit them. Tonight, she would betray them. At the outer doors, she pressed her palm against the inlaid sigil. Ancient runes flared to life, burning briefly gold beneath her skin, then dimming again, sullen. Angry. The locks groaned open like something waking from a bad dream. Cassian slipped inside first, sword drawn. Selene followed, her heart hammering against her ribs, her hand tingling where the sigil had branded her touch. Inside, the vault was a cathedral of secrets, towering shelves of iron-bound tomes, scrolls sealed in cracked leather, crates stamped with the faded sigils of dead houses. The air was cold and dry, tinged with dust and something sweeter, the slow, inevitable decay of legacy. "Where?" Cassian whispered. Selene led him toward the sanctum at the center, where the oldest ledgers were kept under false titles. Her inheritance. Her betrayal. The ledgers of Concord, she said. My father hid them among treaties that no one dares question. Their fingers flew over scrolls and bindings. Every whisper of parchment sounded deafening. Every second dragged like a blade across flesh. Minutes passed. Or hours. Then, I have it, Cassian breathed. He held up a slim ledger, bound in black leather, plain, unremarkable, except for the faint shimmer of warding spells along the spine. Selene cracked it open. Inside, payments to outlawed houses, signatures of dead triumvirs, encoded orders for rebellion and purge alike. Proof. Treason. Enough to bring a lord of the triumvirate to ruin. Selene let out a slow, trembling breath. Let's go, she said. They were halfway to the exit when it happened. A soft metallic click from the stairwell above. Selene froze. Her hand drifted to her belt, fingertips brushing steel. Cassian turned, sword half raised. Figures bled from the shadows, Dominion guards in black steel masks. Silent. Methodical. Her breath caught like a knot in her throat. Kale, who had once drawn sigils with her in candlelight, laughing softly when she got the angles wrong. Kale, who had held the southern flank beside her during the siege of Noctal. Who had once whispered, if this house falls, I'll fall with it. He stood now in full Dominion black, blade at his side, the house crest removed from his shoulder. A soldier. A traitor. Or maybe the loyal one after all. I'm sorry, my lady, Kale said. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. Truly. But you chose the wrong side. His eyes didn't hold triumph. Just weariness. A kind of grief. Selene's voice barely rose above a whisper. You could have warned me. I tried, he said. You stopped listening. The blood oath between Selene and Cassian flared white-hot, betrayal burning into her ribs, into her bones. Kale's voice had barely faded when another sound rippled through the vault, not a whisper this time, but the cold, measured thump of boots against stone. Footsteps. Heavy. Unhurried. Cassian pivoted toward the stairwell, sword lifting, breath held. He shifted slightly closer to Selene, his body angling to protect her without blocking her line of sight. She noticed. Her chest ached. Then Lord Veylor appeared. He descended like judgment made flesh, his crimson sash catching the low light like a blade drawn in slow motion. He did not wear armor. Only his house robes, dark, immaculate, formal, with a ring of antique keys at his belt and a single gleaming clasp at his collar, the sigil of House Veylor, stitched in silver thread. He looked older than he had hours ago. The weight of history sagged from his shoulders. And yet, in his eyes, clarity. Resolve. The vault seemed to lean inward, as if the walls recognized him. Leave, he said to the guards. His voice cut the vault like a guillotine. Silence followed. My lord? Kale asked, faltering. They're traitors. I said leave. The guards shifted, confused. One took a hesitant step back. Another raised their weapon, then lowered it, uncertain. Then Veylor's gaze found Selene. She remembered being small, running those vault corridors, clinging to his hand as he showed her heirlooms in velvet-lined drawers. She remembered the night he placed a rook-shaped pendant in her palm and said, "You must learn to sacrifice." Her fingers twitched now, as if still holding that cold metal piece. Veylor's voice dropped to something colder than steel. You were meant to protect this house. You were meant to earn my loyalty, Selene snapped. Something cracked in his expression, the faintest fracture in a marble mask. Then he nodded once. Final. So be it. He turned to Kale. Kill them both. Kale surged forward, drawing steel, too fast, too close. Selene barely got her blade up in time, parrying with a ringing clash that sent sparks dancing across the floor. Their blades screamed against each other. Cassian lunged at the nearest guard who hadn't yet retreated, driving him back into a shelf of scrolls. Paper burst into the air like startled birds. Veylor raised a hand. Arcane glyphs flared at his wrist, wards bound in blood and name. Shelves groaned and collapsed as ancient protective spells twisted into offensive force. The very stone of the vault buckled as pressure built in the air. Selene dodged a collapsing column of ledgers. Her boot slid on parchment, and she nearly lost her balance before slamming into Cale's chest, her dagger flashing upward, missing his throat by inches. "You swore to me," she shouted. Cale grunted, deflecting with a vambrace. "And I'll die for that oath, but not tonight." Cassian cried out. A blade had grazed his arm, but his stance didn't falter. Blood welled through his sleeve. He pivoted, brought his sword down in a clean arc that split a guard's spear in half. "Selene, now," he shouted. She ducked under Cale's next swing, rolled toward the sanctum doors. Cassian was already backing toward her, sword sweeping in broad, warning arcs. Veylor raised his hand again. More glyphs. More power. The vault shook. Stone cracked. Shelves fell like dominoes, scrolls unraveling midair. Cassian grabbed Selene's arm. Together, they sprinted for the exit, ledger clenched to Selene's chest, Cale's voice shouting behind them, Veylor's final command echoing off the stones: "Burn the vault if you must, but do not let them leave with that book." They reached the outer doors, the exit now half buried in debris from the collapsing vault. The sigil plate flickered, unstable, damaged by the force of Veylor's spell. Cassian slammed his shoulder into a fallen beam, clearing a narrow path. Behind them, Cale roared orders. More guards spilled into the chamber. The vault was choking on dust and firelight. Selene glanced at the ledger in her arms, black leather, still warm from her grip. The proof. Everything they came for. Everything they couldn't keep. "Cassian," she said, breathless. "I need fire." "What? Now?" He blinked, saw the look in her eyes, and didn't argue. He pulled a sparkstone from his belt and struck it against the edge of his blade. Selene tore the cover from the ledger. The warding spell cracked, not just a shimmer, but a sound, like ice breaking over a grave. She dropped the book onto a shattered stone pedestal and dragged the spark across its spine. Flames leapt high. The fire caught with terrifying speed, fed by old parchment, ancient oils, powdered enchantments. The ledgers combusted with a hungry shriek, the very magic within them turning to heat and smoke. Cale screamed behind them, "No." The guards hesitated, thrown by the sudden inferno. One of them backed into a shelf that collapsed in a burst of sparks. The fire was more than heat, it was revelation undone. Legacy incinerated. Selene's lungs burned. Her eyes stung. Cassian took her hand. "This way," he shouted, pulling her toward the narrow breach in the wall, a forgotten maintenance tunnel marked only in the oldest blueprints. The fire roared behind them. A tower of flame and collapsing secrets. And in the flickering light, Selene turned once, just once, to look back through the smoke. Veylor stood at the edge of the fire, motionless. Not trying to flee. Not calling for water. Just watching her. As if in that moment, father and daughter understood what had truly been lost. He didn't try to stop her. He never had. Then Cassian dragged her into the dark, and the vault, and everything it held, vanished behind a wall of fire and ash. Interlude. He returned to his study before the hour turned, alone. No guards. No summons sent. No servants called. He dismissed them all with a nod. He poured a glass of ember wine, his father's vintage, and sat beneath the carved arch of his family's ancestral wall. Outside, bells tolled gently through the fog. He opened an old box on his desk and removed a single chess piece, the queen. The paint was chipped. The ivory worn. Selene had once stolen it as a girl and declared it hers. The queen should never wait, she had said. She should lead. He set the piece down before him. A knock. 3 soft taps. Familiar. Expected. 3 cloaked figures entered, silent, graceful, almost reverent. They were dressed in mourning black, faces veiled. One carried a blade folded in velvet. One carried a silver file. One carried nothing at all. The Minister of Shadows never sent letters. They stood before him. "You've read the names," Veylor said. "You know I stayed my hand." The blade bearer nodded once. "I loved her," Veylor said. "That was my only crime." No one answered. The room was quiet as breath. He took a final sip of wine. Then folded a piece of parchment. Wrote a single word. Left it beside the queen. "Selene." The blade slid clean. There was no scream. Only the thud of a body that had long since accepted its fall.
The raid.
The raid came at midnight. No warning. No pretense of justice. Only the thrum of Dominion boots on broken cobbles and the hiss of steam rifles charging in the dark. Mara Thorne had known they would come. Not if, when. She'd stayed anyway. The granary had once stored wheat for House Veylor's winter larders. Now it held ghosts. Cracked beams, scorched rafters, the scent of mildew and soot. A war widow slept in the loft with her infant. A weaver crouched near the old grain chute, trembling through prayers he no longer believed in. 2 boys, barely 10, curled beneath a tarp like bundled wire. A wounded courier watched the boarded windows with wide, broken eyes, his sling still marked with a flame thread of the old Ember division. Mara stood watch near the furnace, her bad leg braced against a rusted crate. One hand on her dagger. The other on the pipe that led toward the alley, their only way out. When the knock came, it wasn't a knock at all. It was a detonation, a blast that tore through the front wall and filled the space with splinters and smoke. Someone screamed. The baby cried once, then went silent. Dominion voices barked from outside, "Secure the perimeter. Thorne is inside. Alive if possible. Broken if not." Mara didn't hesitate. She pulled the tarp from the boys and shoved them toward the chute. "Down. Quiet. Run when you hit dirt. Don't stop." She turned to the widow in the loft. "Go." The woman stared, frozen, until Mara shouted again. She moved. The door shattered inward. Gas hissed. A Dominion soldier in scaled black armor charged through the smoke, too fast, too confident. Mara met him with the crate's iron edge. It cracked across his helm. He staggered. She followed with her elbow, teeth broke, blood spattered. Another soldier came in behind him, swinging wide. Mara ducked and drove her knee into his gut. But the third caught her, a blow to the ribs that knocked the breath from her lungs. She reeled, slammed into the stone wall. Then came more. Boots. Barked orders. Chains. She fought like memory. Like pride itself. Her dagger flashed once, a throat opened. Then pain, a blade across her side. A shock stick to her thigh. Hands grabbed her arms, wrenching them back. The world tipped sideways. Her knees hit stone. Her bad leg buckled. Still, she didn't scream. Instead, as they forced her upright, she locked eyes with the Dominion captain stepping through the smoke. A tall woman in raven black armor, a high silk command sash and a face like glass left too long in frost. "You're her?" the captain asked flatly. "Not what you expected?" Mara rasped. "I expected someone who knew when they'd lost." Mara spat blood at her boots. "You've only won when no one's left to remember." The captain didn't flinch. She nodded. "And then they beat her. Not to kill. No, death would have been mercy. This was punishment. A lesson. They broke her nose. Struck her ribs until every breath was blood. Her hair was torn loose, her coat ripped down the back, and her wrists manacled so tight she bled through the steel. She was still conscious when they dragged her from the granary. Civilians had gathered, drawn by noise, or smoke, or dread. Some stood in windows, faces half lit by torchlight. Others lined the street, silent and unmoving. Not cheering. Not weeping. Just watching. The Dominion captain turned and barked an order, "This is what treason looks like." Mara, head lolling, lifted it just barely. Her one good eye scanned the faces. Found a girl, no older than 12, standing barefoot in the gutter. Her eyes were wide. Her fists clenched at her sides. Mara held her gaze. "Remember," she mouthed. Then they dragged her through the mud. The next morning, the granary was sealed. Burned, some said. Wiped clean of names. But in the alleys beyond the square, the first mark appeared, a lion's head chalked in black on a cracked cistern wall. By dusk, there were more. A crown broken in ash. A dagger with no hilt. And the word scrawled again and again. She stood. "We remember."
The message.
The sun had barely risen. The light was pale and cold, leaking in through the slatted windows of the eastern antechamber like a breath held too long. The fire had not been fed since before midnight, and the coals glowed faintly beneath the ash, stubborn in their dying. Selene sat on the stone bench by the hearth, still dressed in the same blood-slicked tunic from the night before. Her gloves lay beside her. Her hands were raw and silent. She had not spoken since the last command was given. A soft knock. Then the door opened without waiting for her answer. Talon Pharaoh stepped inside. No armor. No formal address. Just him, wrapped in a gray cloak that smelled faintly of damp and night. He held a letter in both hands, sealed in red wax. The wax was cracked. He didn't speak. He only held it out. Selene took it. Her fingers left a faint smear of dried blood on the parchment. She opened it. There were only a few lines. No signature. Lord Veylor is dead. House remains. Heart is quiet. No rights. She read it again. And again. The fire did not crackle. The room did not move. Something shifted in her chest, slow and cold and sickening. Not pain. Not yet. Just the rearranging of something vital. The sudden knowledge of an absence she had spent years preparing for, but had never fully believed would arrive. Her father was dead. Her father was dead. Not the Lord of House Veylor. Not the Chancellor of the Dominion. Not the man who had arranged her silence, her marriage, her future. Just her father. The man who had held her steady when she first tried to climb. Who had taught her how to bluff, how to speak without blinking. Who had let her win one game of chess. Only one. But he'd smiled. She had seen him. Not 2 nights past. Alone in the Crimson Chamber, whispering to the Queen Peace. He hadn't looked like a man preparing to die. Unless he had known. Unless he had already been sentenced. She stared down at the letter. She did not weep. The tears sat behind her ribs, thick and sharp, but did not rise. Talon sat across from her without asking. He said nothing. Just waited. That was the mercy of him. Finally, Selene looked at him. Her voice, when it came, was hollow and hoarse. Who? He didn't lie. Minister's order. Quiet knives. Her breath hitched. Just once. She looked back to the fire. The letter curled in her hand. She didn't let it go. She let it blacken slowly, edge by edge. They made it look clean, Talon said. Of course they did. The fire caught the last line, no rights. Selene stood. Her legs ached. Her spine felt heavier than it had last night. She walked to the desk. Picked up the Queen piece. She had kept it close, tucked among the things no one was allowed to touch. She turned it over once in her fingers. Then twice. Then again. He hesitated, she said. That's why they killed him. Talon didn't disagree. Selene looked toward the window. The sun was rising. Cold and pale. No warmth. He wasn't brave, she said. Not the way we needed. Not for what comes next. She closed her hand around the Queen. But he remembered who I was. At the end. That's something. Silence stretched. What will you do? Talon asked. Selene looked down at the piece again. Her fingers shook once, just once. Then steadied. What I was born for. She turned back to the fire. Tossed the last blackened curl of parchment into the flames. The queen she kept. The silence she carried with her out the door.
Chapter 7. The Fall from Grace.
Selene staggered against the catacomb wall, her vision swimming. Every muscle screamed. The copper tang of blood coated her tongue. Her cloak clung to her in damp, frayed tatters, and cold sweat glued her hair to her temples. Somewhere behind her, Cassian cursed under his breath, clutching his side where a dominion blade had slashed deep. Both alive. Both bleeding. Barely. Above them, the citadel roared. Bells told the hunt, deep, endless knells that split the night into ragged shards. Somewhere, banners were lowered. Orders barked. Names cursed into the stone and sky. Selene Veylor, traitor. Cassian Merrow, condemned. The proclamations would already be flying through the court, scribed and sealed. House Veylor disavowed. Merrow outlawed anew. Their faces plastered on parchment for the hunters to tear apart. She pressed a bloodied hand against the rough stone, forcing herself upright. Move. Breathe. Survive. We have to go, she rasped. Her voice scraped raw in her throat. They'll drive the hounds into the lower tunnels by dawn. Cassian leaned heavily against the opposite wall. Pale, blood soaking through his ruined tunic, but grimly upright. They've sealed the inner gates, he said. There's no going back. Selene met his gaze, exhausted, defiant, burning. The blood oath between them pulsed faintly beneath her ribs, not pain but an aching reminder. We are not alone. We are not broken. We're not going back, she said. They moved through the blackened veins of the Undercity, a labyrinth where Dominion light never reached. Selene led, half by memory, half by instinct. She counted steps by heartbeats. She listened to the walls, feeling where the stone shifted, where old air breathed. Above, the citadel shone like a poisoned star. Below, the dead whispered. The deeper they descended, the colder the air grew. Moisture wept from the stones. Mold choked the broken arches. The only sounds were their own ragged breaths and the relentless, ghostly echo of the bells. Hours passed. Or perhaps it was lifetimes. When at last they stumbled into the ruins beneath the eastern wall, half collapsed, abandoned even by the rats, Selene collapsed behind a fallen column, dragging Cassian down beside her. He groaned as he hit the ground, his breath rattling. Selene tore strips from her ruined cloak, pressing them hard against the gash along his ribs. You should have let me fight harder, Cassian muttered, his voice ragged. Stopped you from burning the proof. Selene bound his wound with brutal efficiency, blinking against the sting of her own tears. You stopped me from dying tonight, she said. We lost a ledger. Not the truth. For now, Cassian said bitterly. Selene pressed her hand to his chest, feeling the fierce, stubborn thrum of his heart against her palm. Still alive? Still fighting? Still hers. Footsteps scraped against the stone nearby. Selene's dagger was in her hand before she could think. A shadow detached itself from the ruined archway, slim, wrapped in coarse traveling leathers, face half-shadowed. Mevin. Her hair was hidden under a rough scarf. Her mouth was curved into a wry smile, amused, dangerous. You look terrible, Mevin said. But at least you're breathing. Selene didn't lower her blade. You followed us. Mevin shrugged, unconcerned. Half the court wants your heads. I want something more valuable. She tossed a bundle to the ground, rough-spun clothes, forged papers, city passes marked with the seal of a minor house. Selene stared at it. Get out, Mevin said. Disappear. Heal. Fight another day. And the price? Selene asked. Mevin's smile sharpened, wolfish. When the Dominion falls, she said, I want a seat at whatever rises from the ashes. Selene's fingers tightened around the dagger hilt. Every instinct screamed distrust. Mevin was a survivor, clever, cold. Her loyalty was a coin flipped in the dark. But Cassian stirred weakly beside her, and the ache of the blood oath burned in Selene's chest. This wasn't about pride anymore. It wasn't even about vengeance. It was about winning. Selene tucked the blade away and straightened. "Agreed," she said. Meaden gave a mocking little bow, cloak flaring like dark wings, and vanished into the ruins. Selene watched her go, the air tasting of ash and old betrayal. Trust nothing, she thought grimly. But use everything.
Ash and Awakening.
Dawn crept slowly over the ruins of the city, bleeding gray and sickly light across the broken stone. Selene crouched behind a fractured pillar, Cassian slumped beside her, both of them swathed in rough-spun cloaks that still smelled of Meaden's hand, smoke, herbs, and something ancient. Beyond the crumbled archway, the slums stretched like a broken crown around the citadel's gleaming walls. Smoke curled from half-collapsed chimneys. Filthy water pooled in the alleys. Rats scurried across shattered cobbles. Here, beyond the Dominion's silk masks and gilded proclamations, the world rotted openly. Selene tightened her hood, hiding her face. Every instinct screamed that even the shadows were dangerous. Behind them, the citadel loomed, pale stone gleaming cruel and proud under the rising sun. Banners still flew from its highest spires, crimson stitched with gold, Dominion sigils yawning wide like the mouths of hungry beasts. The bells had fallen silent. They think we are dead, Selene thought. Good. Let them believe it. Cassian stirred, gritting his teeth as he pushed himself upright. How bad? Selene asked softly. He flashed a grim smile. Still breathing. Selene nodded once. No room for pity. No time for weakness. They had survived the purge. Survived the betrayal. But survival was not victory. Not yet. Meaden's forged papers burned against Selene's ribs, tucked close to her heart. Fake names. Forged lives. Temporary lies to buy real time. The blood oath pulsed faintly under her skin, not warning, not pain, but a steady thrum. A vow remembered. A battle yet to come. They moved at dawn's edge, slipping through the decaying streets like ghosts. Past vendors hawking spoiled goods under tattered awnings. Past men who watched them with the dead, hollow eyes of the starved. Past children with sharp faces and sharper knives. This was the other face of the Dominion, the one the court pretended did not exist. The price of power paid in forgotten lives. Selene felt the fury coil tighter with every step. They crossed the final bridge at the slum's edge, where a broken aqueduct spilled filthy water into a bone-dry canal. Beyond, the eastern gates yawned open, not guarded, for there was nothing outside the citadel that the Dominion feared. Nothing yet. Selene and Cassian slipped through without challenge. No banners. No cheers. Only the wind. Beyond the walls, the world stretched wide and broken. Ruined villages sagged against the hillsides. Ash-choked fields stretched to the horizon. The remnants of old wars scarred the earth, trenches, burned towers, stone roads leading to nowhere. Selene pulled her hood lower against the rising sun. She felt the citadel at her back, a weight, a memory. Cassian drew up beside her, breathing hard but steady. For a moment, they simply stood there, two fugitives, blood-stained and hollowed and alive. Cassian glanced at her, exhaustion and stubborn defiance etched into every line of his face. We have nothing left, he said hoarsely. Selene turned, threading her fingers through his, grounding herself, grounding him. No, she said. We have each other. And it was enough. It had to be.
Chapter 8. Ashes of the Crown.
The slums beyond the citadel stank of lie, smoke, and slow despair. Selene moved through the crooked alleys with her hood pulled low, boots silent on broken stone. Beside her, Cassian limped beneath the weight of his cloak, every step pulled from clenched teeth and iron will. In the slums, no one cared who you'd been. Only what you could offer now. They passed ruined murals defaced with ash. Propaganda posters, once demanding loyalty to the triumvirate, had been overpainted with crude symbols, a broken crown. A flame with no name. Words scrawled in charcoal on doors and crumbling walls. Ash remembers. The flame returns. Bend or burn. Ghosts of rebellion haunted the alleys. Rumors of nobles who had fled. Of prisoners who never reached the gates. Of voices whispering truths beneath the rot. Selene said nothing. But something stirred in her chest. A thread pulled taut. Their shelter was a tenement above a tanner's shop, where the stench of hides clung to everything. The walls swept with damp. Rats ruled the rafters. The mattress was straw and mold and stubborn hope. It was miserable. Filthy. Perfect. Cassian collapsed onto the bedding with a hiss that barely escaped his lips. Selene dropped beside him, breath shallow, fingers quick as she unwrapped the bandages at his side. The wound was healing, barely, but angry red lines spread from its edges. Heat pulsed beneath the skin like coals buried too deep. Selene cursed under her breath, fumbling for their last vial of boiled water. "I need salve," she muttered. "Cleaner water. Herbs. This is." Cassian caught her wrist. His grip was weak, but his voice was steel. "Selene." She looked at him. Really looked. He was burning up, but his eyes were clear, and full of something harder than pain. "Rest," he said. "We can't," she snapped. "You're getting worse and I let us here, you saved us." He smiled faintly, and it broke her. Because it was the smile of a boy who had once stood in a ballroom and asked for a dance. And of a man who had followed her into fire. "Then let's make them bleed first," he said. Selene swallowed the ache. Not at once. 2 nights later, she sat in the smoke-thick shadows of a tavern called the Shattered Crown. It was carved into the bones of a ruin, a broken hall with charred rafters and walls that leaned like drunk kings. Smoke curled thick through the beams, heavy with sweat, rot, and secrets. Every conversation was a wager whispered beside a knife. At the center of the room, someone had nailed a rusted diadem to a cracked wooden post. The crown hung crooked, pierced and bleeding rust. A joke. A warning. A prayer. Selene nursed a mug of bitter beer, listening. The whispers came fast now, purges, disappearances, lists of the irreconcilable. Not just thieves or agitators. Nobles. Dissenters. Ghosts. She caught the name in a lull between dice rolls and threats, Marathorn. A once loyal general. Rumored dead. Rumored worse. Selene's hand tightened around the mug. If she was alive, if she was being moved tonight, across the room, Cassian leaned against the scorched beam, hood shadowing his fevered eyes, scanning exits like a wounded wolf. When the tavern noise surged again, he crossed to her and slid into the seat beside her. "Second bell," he murmured. "West Gate." "They're moving her then." Selene's eyes met his. Fierce. Steady. "Then we stop them." Back in the tenement, Selene cleaned the blade Cassian handed her. Each stroke against the whetstone steadied her heartbeat. Each flicker of steel whispered, "You are not prey anymore." Cassian sat across from her, pale and sweating, but the fire in his eyes had not dimmed. "You don't have to do this," he said. She looked up. One brow arched. "You could leave," he continued. "We both could. Cross the border. Disappear. Let the world burn without us. And you'd go with me?" she asked. Cassian didn't answer right away. Then he shook his head. "No." Selene set the dagger down gently. Crossed to him in silence. Sank to her knees. Touched his fevered face. "If we fall," she whispered, "we fall together." Cassian's hand trembled as it cradled the back of her neck. Their foreheads touched. Breath mingled. The blood oath pulsed, not pain. Promise. And then he kissed her. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't clean. It was desperation and defiance and something that tasted like a vow. When they broke apart, the candle guttered low. "No more running," Cassian said. Selene smiled. "Fierce as fire. No more hiding." The ambush came beneath the ruined archway called the Dagger's Teeth, jagged stones reaching like shattered fingers toward the storm-lit sky. The convoy rumbled slow and careless, ironbound carts pulled by steam-choked engines. Torchlight flickered on armor and iron. Guards marched beside the wagons, visors low, boots sure. The prisoners didn't cry out. They'd long since learned silence. Selene moved through the dark like a phantom. Her dagger kissed the throat of the first guard, no sound, no mercy. He fell like a dropped sack. Cassian was slower. He grunted as he lunged, his wound tearing open with a hiss. His blade still found its mark, but blood soaked his side. He staggered. Selene caught him. Foreheads touched again, one breath. "Stay up," she breathed. "I'm not done," he growled. The battle was brutal. Dominion guards fought with precision, not panic. One barked clipped orders. Another, a woman with a cracked helm and haunted eyes, fought like she welcomed death. Selene met her in sparks and steel. "Run," she warned. The woman spat blood. "You first?" One feint. One slip. And the woman fell. Smoke thickened. Blood slicked the stones. One cage cracked open. Then another. And another. Limbs. Voices. Life. From the final cart, a figure stepped down. Tall. Scarred. Eyes like razors beneath matted hair. She moved with a soldier's grace. Stood with a storm's silence. Selene's breath caught. "General Thorne," she said. The woman blinked. A slow, sharp smile. "You know my name. We heard you were dead." "I was," Mara Thorne said. "Then I got better." Cassian coughed behind them. "We need fighters." Thorne looked at them. "The blood. The broken. The fire." Then she bowed, not low, but enough. "My name is General Mara Thorne," she said. "And if you're building a rebellion," a pause. A grin like flint sparking steel. "You just found your first army." At dawn, Selene stood atop a broken wall overlooking the slums. Below her, the city stirred. Not to bells or orders, but to shouting. To gathering. Fires burned where Dominion banners had fallen or fled. And in the streets, 100 voices murmured, names, oaths, memories. Mara Thorne stood in the square, barking commands, rallying the forgotten. Strips of cloth became banners. Kitchen knives became swords. Prisoners became soldiers. Cassian stood beside Selene, cloak wrapped tight, blood soaking his bandages. He looked at her, not with pity, but with pride. "We're not nobles anymore." Selene turned to him, wind tugging her hair. "No," she said. "We're something worse. A beat. Together, rebels." And from that high wall, watching the city rise, Selene felt the fire catch. Not fear. Not guilt. Purpose. The Dominion had taught her how to kneel. Now, it would learn how she burned.
Chapter 9. The Fire That Follows.
The ruins crackled with low fires and murmured voices, a fragile heartbeat beneath the shattered sky. Selene stood with Cassian and General Mara Veylor around a broken stone table in what had once been the archives of House Reiner. Now it was soot, broken stone, and wind. The shattered dome above had once held painted constellations. She could still see flecks of gold, swallowed now by ash. A crude map, stitched together from memory and scraps, lay between them. Candlelight guttered low as if straining to witness their resolve. Their shadows stretched long over the stone, crooked giants preparing for war. They had no crowns. No banners. Only the fire in their lungs and the weight of the impossible in their hands. Mara stabbed a dagger into the map, the tip striking a blotched mark near the western edge of the lower city, 2 streets beyond the charred bones of the old amphitheater. "The Dominion's west outpost," she said. Her voice, gravel thick and iron sure, cut through the ruins' hush. "Used to be a grain haul back when the old trade lines ran clean. Now they've packed it with rations, medicine, and powder, enough to keep 3 regiments standing. We take it, we carve out their stomach. Starve them. Choke their siege. Cassian's arms were folded, eyes narrowed. There's a ridge behind it. Dominion artillery's got a clear sweep of the ground. If they see us coming, we'll burn before we breach the outer wall. They won't see us, Mara said. She scraped the dagger's edge along a faded ink line, running like a crack beneath the map's surface. The Ashwell tunnels still run under that sector. My scouts, Lise and Boren, made it through yesterday. Collapsed in places, but passable. If we move at dusk, time it with a shift change, we can gut the outpost before they blink. Selene leaned in, tracing the path with her eyes. The map looked like a wound, ragged edges, bruised lines, stitched guesses masquerading as strategy. Their forces were little more than desperate names and borrowed glyphs. Exiles. Street-born orphans. Scribes who now carried swords. A dream stitched together by fire and desperation. 30 fighters? She asked. No more? 30's all we can sneak through the tunnels, Mara said. Any more and we clog ourselves. The strike has to be fast, loud and gone before they know where to swing. And the signal towers? Selene pressed. If even one beacon lights the ridge, we'll have stormfire raining down. I've got 4 runners who know the spires, Cassian said. Street-born. They've worked under Dominion noses for years. They'll cut the lines, climb the towers, kill the lookouts if they have to. Selene studied him. No bravado. No optimism. Just cold reality behind his gaze. And the escape? She asked. The tunnels run north under the river gate, Mara said. But if they collapse? Cassian's voice was dry. Then we hold the alley. Long enough for Reka to bury the depot. Selene looked up at the name. Reka, former Dominion architect, now their saboteur. The woman had once designed grain vaults and fire breaks. Now she was repurposing her own knowledge to destroy what she'd built. We'll use silent powder, Mara added. No smoke. No warning. Selene's gaze drifted again to the mark on the map. West Outpost. But that wasn't its name, not to her. It was the Hall of Harvests. She'd visited once with her father during the late summer trade season. She remembered the workers, kind-faced, red-handed from lifting apple barrels. She remembered climbing the mural stairs and pointing at the painted arch overhead, vines, firebirds, stars. She remembered the gold flecks, like seeds in the stone. The mural had been burned away. The arch melted with acid. The firebirds turned to cinders. This is what patience brought you, she thought. What diplomacy failed to stop. Her fingers hovered near the dagger Mara had buried in the stone. They trembled, once. She steadied them. If we strike, she said, the Dominion will retaliate. Viciously. Harder than before. Yes, Mara said. And when they do, the people will know we were never just whispers in shadow. They'll see fire. Rage. Resistance. Cassian looked at Selene again. Silent, but steady. His belief in her didn't shine like a torch, it burned low, reliable, like an ember kept alive beneath ash. You could still step away, she thought. Wait. Survive. Let someone else light the pyre. But her house was gone. Her father's blood still stained the palace stones. Her name had been erased from the domes of power. Politics had failed. Compromise had bought only silence. Let it end here, not in quiet, but in flame. Selene reached out and closed her hand over the dagger. The hilt was warm, not from the fire, but from the iron in Mara's hand. From the blood of other choices already made. Her voice was steady. Cold with resolve. We strike. Mara nodded once, like the pull of a trigger. I'll alert the ashbound. We move before moonrise. Cassian exhaled through his nose, slow and sure. His mouth twitched, just slightly, a ghost of pride. A flicker of what might someday become hope. Above them, a gust of wind passed through the ruined dome. Ash whispered through the air like falling snow. The candle flames danced. Somewhere distant, thunder murmured, or maybe it was just the city shifting in its sleep. There would be no turning back. Later that night, as armor was strapped on and knives checked twice, Selene walked the upper ledge of the ruins alone. The streets below were half buried in shadow, flickering with the dying red of cook fires. She could hear laughter from a distant alley, sharp, wild, and desperate. Not joy. Just the madness of those with nothing left to lose. The ashbound moved quietly in the dark, preparing not with ceremony but with necessity. Black cloth around arms. Half-muffled boots. Hands scrawled with sigils of old houses, old gods. Below her, Reka crouched over a satchel of powder, explaining charge placement to a boy no older than 15. He listened with the stillness of the condemned. Selene looked up. The stars had been absent for weeks, swallowed by smoke and Dominion lantern light. But she imagined them still there, waiting. Watching. The fire that followed would not ask permission. It would not bow. It would take the city in both hands, and remake it.
The assault.
The signal came in the form of flame. At the far western wall, Mara's scouts lit barrels of pitch in the alleyways, setting fire to a block of abandoned grain carts. Black smoke spiraled upward, a decoy blaze designed to draw Dominion eyes to the rear. A moment later, thunder ripped the air. Cassian's saboteurs had buried charges beneath the old catacombs, and when they detonated, the entire eastern wall of the outpost buckled inward with a deafening roar. Stone shattered. Dust billowed. The ground beneath the Dominion garrison shivered. Selene didn't wait for orders. Didn't wait for the fear. She was already running. For the fallen, she cried, voice rising above the chaos like a blade unsheathed. The rebels surged forward. Arrows sang from the ramparts. Some lit with flame, others whispering with enchantment. The first wave fell hard, bodies thudding against cracked cobble and broken crates. One man, Kellen, took an arrow to the throat mid-cry and dropped without a sound. Selene ducked beneath the lip of a collapsed archway. The sting of ash clung to her throat, and the heat from the fires behind her painted the morning sky blood orange. Then she moved, fast. She burst from cover, blade raised high, driving her sword into the belly of a red-cloaked Dominion soldier before he could lift his shield. She yanked it free with a wet rip, pivoted, and slashed down a second who rushed in blindly. Steel screamed against steel. To her left, Cassian charged, hammer in one hand, short sword in the other. He moved like a siege engine, crushing everything in his path. A Dominion pike shattered on his shoulder plate. He responded by driving the spike of his hammer into the man's eye socket, wrenching it free with a spray of gore. Onward. Cassian roared. Rebels poured through the breach behind them. Half-trained, underarmed, some barefoot, but burning with fury. Selene led them toward the inner gates. 2 Dominion officers stepped into her path, heavy armor, trained stance, twin swords gleaming. The first struck fast, she parried low, twisted, slid under his guard, and plunged her dagger beneath his breastplate. He gasped once. The second caught her across the ribs with a glancing blow. She stumbled, rolled, came up bloody but unbroken, and slashed his hamstring before cutting his throat from behind. Blood sprayed. Smoke choked the air. The rebels rallied, cries echoing from ruin to ruin. Then Mara's second wave slammed into the flank, a wedge formation of fighters in scavenged armor, roaring battle hymns as they crashed through the outer yard. The Dominion staggered. For a heartbeat, they reeled. And then the magic came. From the high balcony of the central tower, a Dominion mage captain in silver-etched robes raised his arms. Sigils spun into the air like burning stars. Heat shimmered. The very air seemed to bend. Cassian shouted, "Mages! Tower!" Selene looked up just as a ring of fire erupted from the sigils, exploding outward in a wave of molten force. She threw herself behind a fallen statue, dragging a bleeding rebel, Jaron, wide-eyed and coughing blood, with her. Behind them, 2 others weren't fast enough. The fire incinerated them mid-scream, leaving nothing but smoking bone and blackened steel. "Get them down," Selene growled. "Too far," Cassian shouted. No clear shot. The mage began weaving again. This time the sigils glowed blue, ice and air. A storm spell. If it finished, half the rebels would freeze mid-charge. Then came the final card. Now. Mara's voice bellowed from the southern gate. From beneath the earth, a sealed drain grate burst open. Joran sappers, filthy, masked, blood-caked, erupted into the courtyard from the tunnels. They carried hooked blades, short axes, and fire glass bombs. They moved with surgical hate. They struck from behind. One leapt onto the tower stairwell and hurled a charge into the mage's flank. It detonated, a burst of glass and fire, sending the spellwork spiraling out of control. The mage captain turned, half his face melted, screaming as Joran himself rammed an iron spike through the back of his neck. The tower pulsed once. The sigils vanished. Silence followed. Then Selene rose. She was covered in soot and blood. Her ribs ached. Her breath came in short, raw gasps. But she charged again, and the rebels followed her into the mouth of the beast. The inner courtyard became a killing ground. Steel met steel. Blades clashed. The screams were endless. Bodies fell and didn't rise. The air was a storm of iron and ash. Selene parried a halberd swing, lost her footing, rolled over a corpse, and slammed her pommel into a Dominion soldier's throat. As he choked and fell, she drove her sword through his chest and left it there, yanking a fallen spear from the ground to fight on. A rebel beside her, Meredith, screamed as she was run through. Selene grabbed her, stabbed her killer in the gut, and caught Meredith's body as it collapsed. The girl was already gone. Behind her, Cassian and Mara fought back to back, covered in blood. Mara had a cut across her scalp, and Cassian was bleeding from his thigh, but neither stopped. Mara caught a Dominion soldier's sword on her bracer and gutted him with her offhand blade. "Push," she roared. "They're breaking." A group of Dominion soldiers fled into the barracks. "Don't let them regroup," Cassian shouted, hurling his hammer into the door before it could shut. It cracked inward. Rebels surged after them. Selene forced herself to keep moving. Her legs were jelly, her vision a red smear. Every heartbeat felt borrowed. She stumbled past Jaron's corpse, saw another boy, Thomas, dragging a wounded rebel out of the line of fire with tears in his eyes. And still the Dominion held the upper tower. 2 archers remained. One notched a flame-tipped arrow and aimed for her. Then a black-feathered bolt took the archer in the eye. He fell, limp. Across the yard, one of Cassian's runners, Nyla, stood atop a shattered barrel, already notching another bolt. "Clear," she shouted. The second archer fled. Selene staggered to the tower steps. Smoke. Blood. Screams. At the top, the last Dominion officer, a captain with gold on his pauldron, drew his sword. "You don't know what you started," he said. Selene said nothing. She stepped forward and fought. The duel was short and brutal. He was trained, fast, precise, but she was fire and fury, and pain made flesh. She caught his blade, locked it, twisted it out of his hand, and drove her spear through his gut. He fell without a sound. Selene turned, dragging herself to the tower's edge. The Dominion banner still hung there, red and gold, soaked in the blood of her people. She took it in both hands, ripped it from its post, and hurled it down into the flames below. It caught fire midair, curling, shriveling, turning to ash as it fell. The courtyard had gone still. Mara limped toward her, Cassian beside her, his hammer dragging on the ground. "We held," Mara said. Her voice was thick, low. "We took it." Selene looked at them. Then out over the wall, where the lower city watched with wide eyes. The smoke would be seen for miles. The Dominion would know. They would come. But for this moment, this one breath of stillness, the outpost was theirs. She didn't smile. Only whispered, "Light the pyres."
The aftermath.
The west outpost lay in rebel hands. The fire still smoldered in the shattered barracks. Blood pooled between the cobbles. Arrows jutted from corpses like weeds in broken soil. Selene stood in the courtyard, surrounded by the wounded, the weary, the victorious. Her cloak hung in tatters. Her hands were slick with blood, some of it hers, most of it not. Her body was a map of bruises and burn welts. She didn't move. Couldn't. Not yet. Cassian limped toward her, dragging his hammer like a memory behind him. A shallow cut bled from his cheek. He touched her shoulder with blood-streaked fingers. "You still standing?" "Barely," she said. "You did it." Selene looked around at the ruined outpost. Smoke curled through shattered windows. A half-burned Dominion banner lay at her feet, trampled into the dirt. "No," she said softly. "We did." For a moment, they just stood in the silence. Then someone, a young rebel boy, bloody but alive, raised a cry, "Selene! Selene!" Others picked it up. A chorus, cracked and raw and defiant. "Selene! Selene! Selene!" She turned away from it. Her eyes scanned the fallen. Jaron. Meredith. Thomas. Dozens she didn't know, but would never forget. They hadn't died for a chant. Mara strode past the gathering crowd, her armor scorched, her expression grim and proud. "They'll remember this," she said. "The day the fire rose. We broke their line. Now we break their will." Selene said nothing. She moved toward the western watchtower, its steps blackened with ash. Slowly, deliberately, she climbed to the top. The city spread out below, rooftops, alleyways, and smoke. Watching. Waiting. Where the Dominion banner had once flown, she stood. She drew her sword, battered, blood-stained, and raised it high. The setting sun caught the steel. A line of fire against the dark. Her voice rang out like a bell of war. "This is our fire," she shouted. "Let it burn everything that holds us down." The rebels roared below her. A sound that shook the stones. From the north, signal towers flickered, the Dominion had seen the blaze. From the east, thunder rumbled, maybe a storm, maybe marching boots. But in this moment, beneath a bleeding sky, Selene felt it, hope, in fire. In ash. In blood. The rebellion had truly begun.